Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. He doesn't belong on this track. The words sliced through the air as sharply as the whistle that followed. The gym fell silent, hundreds of eyes locking on the 12-year-old boy whose prosthetic leg suddenly seemed to gleam under the harsh fluorescent lights. Jamie's face flushed red, his months of training collapsing under the weight of a single sentence. Parents shifted uncomfortably in the bleachers. Athletes froze mid-stretch. Coach Wilson's clipboard clattered to the floor as he stepped forward, but the official raised his hand dismissively. "Rules are rules," he continued, voice amplified by the sudden silence. "That thing gives him an unfair advantage." Jamie's eyes fixed on the polished gym floor, his fingers unconsciously tracing the edge where flesh met carbon fiber. What nobody noticed was the figure standing in the shadow of the equipment room door. The familiar broad shoulders and imposing silhouette that had dominated movie screens worldwide was now perfectly still, watching. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson had come to support his friend's son's track meet, expecting to sign a few autographs and offer some encouragement. Instead, he was about to deliver a lesson in what true strength really means, one that would change lives far beyond this small-town gymnasium. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. Jamie had been the first to arrive at the gym that morning, as he had been every day for the past 6 months. Before the other kids, before even Coach Wilson, his routine was sacred. 15 minutes of stretching, focus on balance, then practice starts until his timing was perfect. The carbon fiber blade that replaced his left leg below the knee made a distinctive sound against the track surface, a sound he'd grown to love, the rhythm of his determination. "You're gonna smoke 'em today," Coach had told him earlier, squeezing his shoulder. Jamie had simply nodded, the way he always did. Not cocky, just confident. The accident 3 years ago had taken his leg but given him something else, a resolve that most adults never find. Parents and students from 5 different schools now filled the bleachers for the regional qualifier. College scouts lingered near the finish line, clipboards in hand. Judge Harmon, known for his by-the-book approach at every meet, surveyed the track with military precision. When Jamie took his position for the 200-meter, the whispers had already started. "Is that even allowed?" A mother in designer athleisure nudged her husband. "Seems like cheating to me." The official's announcement crackled through the speakers, introducing the next event. When Jamie's name was called, there was scattered applause, punctuated by uncomfortable silence. He'd felt it before, that mix of pity and skepticism that followed him onto every track. But today was different. Today was the qualifier that could take him to state championships, the culmination of countless early mornings and late nights. As he approached the starting block, Judge Harmon stepped forward, clipboard raised like a shield. "Hold up," he called, loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear clearly. Jamie froze, 1 foot on the track. The judge conferred with 2 other officials, their heads bowed together, occasional glances thrown Jamie's way. The minutes stretched painfully. Then came the verdict, the words that silenced the gym. "That leg gives you an unfair mechanical advantage. Paralympic events exist for a reason." The judge's voice was clipped, professional, as if reciting a rulebook passage. But Jamie heard what lay beneath: discomfort, perhaps even fear of something he didn't understand. The other runners glanced at each other awkwardly, unsure whether to step away from their blocks. Coach Wilson surged forward, face flushed beneath his salt and pepper beard. "This is ridiculous. Jamie's prosthetic is completely regulation. We have the paperwork." Not according to new district guidelines. Judge Harmon cut him off, tapping his clipboard. Paragraph 16, subsection C, clearly states that mechanical enhancements. Jamie's mother stood up in the bleachers, her voice cutting through the tension. My son lost his leg. How dare you? The atmosphere in the gym crackled with tension. Parents whispered furiously, phone cameras discreetly raised. Jamie stood frozen, his practice shirt suddenly feeling too tight across his chest. This was exactly what he'd feared, becoming a spectacle, a debate topic rather than an athlete. In the equipment room doorway, Dwayne Johnson watched, his expression hardening. He had come here as a favor to an old friend, expecting to make a brief appearance to surprise the kids. Instead, he found himself witnessing something that struck at his core beliefs, about fairness, about strength, about what it means to overcome. The whispers around the gym grew as people began noticing his presence, but for once, he wasn't thinking about being recognized. His focus remained locked on the boy standing alone on the track, dignity under siege. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. Jamie's hands trembled as he fought to maintain composure. 6 months of 5 a.m. training sessions, countless falls on the track, blisters where the prosthetic met skin, all to be reduced to a mechanical advantage debate in front of everyone. Some kids snickered at the far end of the bleachers. Their coach didn't stop them. I'd like to see the exact regulation, Coach Wilson demanded, stepping closer to Judge Harmon. The overhead lights caught the sweat beading on the judge's forehead as he flipped through his clipboard papers. A few other officials huddled around him, their whispers creating a barrier between them and the growing tension in the gym. This is a disgrace, a father shouted from the third row. Whether supporting Jamie or the judge wasn't immediately clear until he continued, the rules exist for a reason. It's not fair to the normal kids. That word, normal, visibly hit Jamie like a physical blow. His shoulders hunched slightly, his gaze dropping from defiant to defeated in an instant. His mother's face contorted with a mixture of rage and heartbreak, torn between rushing to her son and confronting the growing murmurs of agreement rippling through parts of the crowd. The atmosphere had transformed from a routine school track meet into something uglier, more primal, a public referendum on what makes someone worthy of inclusion. College scouts shifted uncomfortably, some making notes, others closing their notebooks altogether. One of Jamie's teammates stepped forward, then hesitated, caught between loyalty and the crushing social pressure of adolescence. The divide in the gym was becoming visible. Those who saw a cheater and those who saw a child being humiliated. A slow, deliberate movement from the equipment room doorway drew eyes across the gymnasium. The unmistakable figure of Dwayne Johnson emerged from the shadows, his presence causing a ripple of whispers that quickly became a wave. Phones rose in unison. The school principal, who had been nervously hovering at the edge of the conflict, straightened her blazer with sudden attention. "That's the Rock." The excited declaration came from somewhere in the bleachers, stating the obvious but breaking the tension momentarily. Johnson moved with purpose, his athletic frame commanding attention without effort. His expression remained measured, unreadable as he crossed the polished floor toward the track. Judge Harmon's clipboard lowered slowly as recognition dawned. The confrontation that had seemed so important seconds ago now took on a different dimension with celebrity presence. The whispers transformed from judgment to excitement, the social currency of the room suddenly revalued. "Mr. Johnson," the principal stepped forward, hand extended. "We had no idea you were—" But Dwayne didn't break stride or shift his focus. He moved past her, past the officials, past Coach Wilson, until he stood directly in front of Jamie. The boy looked up, his expression a complex mixture of embarrassment and awe. "You're Jamie, right?" Dwayne's voice was quieter than his public persona might suggest, but in the now hushed gym, it carried easily. "I heard about your qualifying times. Impressive stuff." Jamie swallowed hard, nodding silently, suddenly unable to find his voice in the presence of a childhood hero. The gym had gone completely silent, hundreds of people straining to hear every word of this unexpected exchange. Dwayne turned slowly, surveying the gymnasium. His gaze lingered on Judge Harmon, whose clipboard now hung limply at his side. "I'm hearing there's some kind of issue with this young man competing." His tone remained conversational, but carried an undercurrent of steel that made the question impossible to dismiss. "It's a matter of regulation, Mr. Johnson," Judge Harmon replied, attempting to regain his official demeanor. His voice wavered slightly. "The prosthetic provides mechanical advantages that—" "Advantages?" Dwayne repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "Let me make sure I understand correctly. This young man lost his leg, trained harder than most adults ever will, qualified fair and square, and now you're saying he has an advantage." The simplicity of the question laid bare the absurdity of the situation. Someone coughed awkwardly in the silence that followed. A few parents who had been nodding along with the judge moments before now studied their shoes with sudden interest. "The regulations are very specific about—" Judge Harmon began again, but his conviction was clearly crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. "I know something about regulations," Dwayne said, his voice taking on the resonance that had filled movie theaters worldwide. "And about advantages." He turned back to Jamie, whose eyes remained fixed on him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Mind if I take a look?" Dwayne gestured to Jamie's prosthetic. After a moment's hesitation, Jamie nodded. The gym collectively held its breath as Dwayne Johnson, global superstar, former wrestling champion, action hero, knelt down on one knee to examine the carbon fiber blade that had become the center of controversy. This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk. Dwayne's fingers traced the curve of the prosthetic blade, examining the engineering with genuine interest. "Carbon fiber, right? Good quality." He spoke directly to Jamie, as if they were the only two people in the room. "How long did it take you to learn to run on this?" 8 months, Jamie answered, his voice stronger now. "Before I could even walk right." Dwayne nodded, standing to his full, impressive height. 8 months just to walk, then more months to run, then more to compete. He turned to address the entire gymnasium, his presence expanding to fill the space. "Anyone here want to explain to me how that's an advantage?" The silence was deafening. Judge Harmon shifted his weight uncomfortably. "I've trained with Olympic athletes," Dwayne continued, his voice projecting effortlessly. "NFL players, world champions. I've seen dedication. But what this young man has done," he gestured to Jamie, "that's beyond impressive. That's extraordinary." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd, the energy in the room shifting perceptibly. Phone cameras continued recording, capturing every word of what was quickly becoming a moment much bigger than a school track meet. "Judge," Dwayne addressed Harmon directly, "I'm curious about something. How many 200-meter sprints have you run with a prosthetic leg?" The question hung in the air, rhetorical but devastating in its simplicity. Judge Harmon's face flushed red, his mouth opening and closing without producing sound. "The thing about advantages," Dwayne continued, pacing slowly along the track, "is that they're not always what they seem." His voice filled the gymnasium without effort, years of arena performances evident in his command of the space. When I was breaking into Hollywood, people told me my background was a disadvantage. My look was too different. My size was too much. He stopped, turning to face the crowd directly. But what looks like a disadvantage to one person is strength to another. It's not about what you're given. It's about what you do with it. Jamie stood straighter now, his eyes no longer on the floor but fixed on Dwayne, absorbing every word. Around the gym, phones captured the moment, social media already lighting up with hashtags and clips. I came here today as a favor to a friend. Dwayne gestured toward the back of the gym where his security detail stood. Thought I'd sign some autographs, take some pictures, but I'm staying for something more important. He walked back to Jamie, placing a hand on his shoulder. I'm staying to watch this young man run. Judge Harmon stepped forward, his authority diminished but his position still official. Mr. Johnson, with all due respect, there are regulations that… Show me. Dwayne's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. Show me exactly where it says this young man can't compete. The exact paragraph. Right now. The judge fumbled with his clipboard, flipping pages with nervous fingers. The other officials exchanged glances, suddenly less certain. It's a district guideline that was recently… Judge Harmon's voice trailed off as he scanned the pages, his confidence visibly eroding under Dwayne's unwavering gaze. Recently what? Dwayne pressed, standing firmly beside Jamie. Recently written? Recently interpreted? Or recently invented? A murmur rippled through the bleachers. The other runners, still in their starting positions, exchanged glances. One of them, a tall boy from a rival school, stepped out of his lane. I don't have a problem competing against him, he said, his voice cracking slightly with adolescent nerves but firm in conviction. He qualified just like the rest of us. Another runner nodded in agreement. Yeah, if anything, we should get to wear those blade things too if they're such an advantage. Laughter broke the tension, spreading through the gym like a release valve. Jamie's mother wiped tears from her eyes, a smile breaking through her previous anguish. Look, Dwayne addressed the judge one final time, his tone more conciliatory now that the momentum had shifted. I understand rules matter, but so does common sense. So does decency. He gestured around the gymnasium. These kids are watching. They're learning what matters. What are we teaching them right now? Judge Harmon looked around at the faces turned toward him, expectant, evaluating, recording this moment for posterity. In the silence, a decision hung in the balance. Not just about a race, but about what kind of world these young people would inherit. Finally, the judge lowered his clipboard. The race will proceed as scheduled, he announced, his voice carrying official weight once more. All qualified participants may compete. It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Jamie's teammates surrounded him, clapping him on the back, their earlier hesitation dissolved by celebrity endorsement and their own rekindled courage. Coach Wilson gripped the boy's shoulder, pride evident in his glistening eyes. You got this, Dwayne told Jamie quietly as the excitement swirled around them. Just like you've trained for. Jamie nodded, a new determination settling over his features. Thank you, he managed, the words inadequate for the moment but all he could muster. Dwayne stepped back as the runners took their positions once more. The atmosphere in the gym had transformed completely. Where there had been tension and division, there was now anticipation and unity. Parents who had been whispering criticisms minutes earlier were now on their feet, phones raised to capture the moment. Judge Harmon raised the starting pistol, his demeanor professional once more, though something in his expression had softened. Runners, Take your marks." Jamie settled into the starting blocks, his prosthetic leg positioned with the precision of countless practice sessions. His focus narrowed to the track ahead, the noise of the crowd fading as he entered the zone of concentration that all athletes know. The pistol cracked, and the runners exploded from their blocks. Jamie's start was clean, his months of practice evident in every movement. The distinctive sound of his blade striking the track blended with the pounding of shoes as the athletes rounded the first curve of the 200-meter. In the stands, Jamie's mother clutched her hands to her chest, years of doctor appointments, surgeries, physical therapy, and early morning practice runs flashing through her mind. Beside her, strangers who had been indifferent or even hostile minutes before now cheered her son's name. Dwayne Johnson stood at the finish line, his formidable arms crossed over his chest, watching not just the race, but the faces in the crowd. The transformation was visible, a lesson unfolding in real time about perception, about courage, about what true strength really means. Jamie wasn't in first place as they came into the final stretch. The tall boy from the rival school had a clear lead, his long legs eating up the track, but Jamie was solidly in the middle of the pack, his form textbook perfect, his face a mask of fierce concentration. When he crossed the finish line, fourth out of 8 runners, the cheer that went up was louder than for the winner. Coach Wilson pumped his fist in the air. College scouts made notes on their clipboards. Judge Harmon nodded almost imperceptibly, something like respect flickering across his features. Jamie bent over, hands on knees, catching his breath. Fourth place wouldn't qualify him for state championships, but that wasn't what mattered in this moment. He'd run his race, not as a symbol or a controversy, but as an athlete. Dwayne approached, extending a hand that Jamie shook with both of his. "Fourth place," the star said, his voice carrying just far enough for those nearby to hear. "Next time, you'll take first." "Yes, sir," Jamie replied, standing taller. Later, as the meet continued and attention shifted to other events, Dwayne took a moment with Judge Harmon away from the crowds. No one heard their brief conversation, but observers noted the judge listening intently, nodding occasionally, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. By evening, clips of what happened had spread across social media platforms. Jamie runs trended nationally. Morning shows requested interviews. But more importantly, in gyms and tracks and schools across the country, conversations started about inclusion, about courage, about seeing beyond assumptions. 3 weeks later, the district guidelines regarding prosthetics were officially clarified, ensuring athletes like Jamie could compete without question. And when state championships rolled around the following year, Jamie was there, not because of a celebrity intervention, but because he'd earned his place. As for Dwayne Johnson, he never publicly discussed what happened that day, despite millions of views online. He didn't need to. The real strength he'd shown wasn't in his famous physique, but in recognizing when to stand up for someone who needed a voice, and then stepping back to let them find their own. Wow, what a story! If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.